Okay, you are listening to Hall Monitor on WPPM 106.5 in Philadelphia, Comcast Channel 66, and streaming live at phillycam.com. You can find us on Twitter at Hall Monitor WPPM, on our website www.hallmonitor.org, or on Facebook at PHWWPPM. Tonight on the program, we will be joined by Jonathan Lovitz, Democratic candidate for the 182nd Legislative District, Kenyatta James of the Economy League of Greater Philadelphia, Denise Clay Murray, our very own, will discuss the result of the Kenyatta Johnson trial, and we'll have an update on the Philadelphia City Council budget hearings. Denise, how are you tonight?
Well, I'm not in court, so I'm okay.
Our long citywide nightmare is over, at least for right now.
Yeah, for the moment. For the moment. But for those in the audience who don't know, the trial that involved City Councilman Kenyatta Johnson, his wife, consultant Don Chavu, and the former CEO and CFO of Universal Companies, Raheem Islam and Shahid Dewan, ended in a mistrial yesterday after the jury was deliberating for somewhere in the neighborhood of 25 hours. They couldn't come to a verdict, so a mistrial has been declared. Now, is this the end of the story? Probably not. But we'll talk a little bit about that later.
All right. So first, we're going to lead off with our interview with Jonathan Lovitz, Democratic candidate for the 182nd Legislative District. Okay, we are here on WPPM 106.5 in Philadelphia with Jonathan Lovitz, Democratic candidate for state representative in the 182nd District. Thank you so much for being with us.
Great to be with you, Larry. Thank you so much.
So tell us about the 182nd District.
The 182nd District is an incredible place. It is, the center of Center City. It is the heart of commerce. It is the heart of arts and culture. It is the hub of transit and economic development and social growth in Philadelphia. Really, as Center City goes, so goes the rest of the city, and frankly, so goes the Commonwealth. So much of what drives innovation and opportunity throughout all of Pennsylvania happens right here. It's a really special place, and I'm just looking out my window at the district right now, and I see nothing but cranes in the sky. That's a good thing to see after so much sort of uncertainty and stagnation through the pandemic. We are growing, and we need to make sure we keep growing.
If elected, what will be your primary focuses in Harrisburg?
Well, one of the most important things is restoring some confidence in the leadership of the Democratic Party, of particularly this district, making sure that the people here know someone who deeply cares about the job, about their life getting better, about our city growing, is on the job 24/7 and wants to get it done well with real gravitas and with some real experience that I think we need. The things that I hope to accomplish, and I know it sounds tricky when we know Democrats will be in the minority for at least another cycle or two, although we're getting closer than ever, are all things that I think are fairly bipartisan, and I've seen in my experience lawmaking over the years can be done. Things like growing an economy that works for everybody, and that's everyone from small businesses to unions to working families. We can promote policies that drive growth and drive opportunity for everyone across the board. And then that goes with increasing public safety, and that's got to have a profound inclusion of equality and justice for all people. We can't let crime be a barrier here in the 182nd or anywhere else in Pennsylvania to growth. And that means common sense gun regulations, things we can all agree on, some common sense needs for increasing transit access and protections for people so that we can get people moving safely back to work, the kinds of things that get diverse communities back up on their feet and feeling like they've got skin in the game and a seat at the table again. And then finally, all things around the environment and schools, and I think they're inextricably linked. Our kids need fully funded, safer schools to grow, and we don't make red or blue schools the same way we don't make red or blue highways. Therefore, all of our kids, and they deserve the same kind of respect and dignity and funding across the board. And the same is true of the environment. Our kids aren't drinking out of red and blue water fountains. They're drinking out of water fountains, and they deserve to have them all be safe and clean, regardless of what county you're in Pennsylvania. So we have a lot that we can accomplish. And I think even in a minority, the Democrats can carry these values to build some serious consensus across the aisle and deliver on things that just make Pennsylvania a little bit more attractive for growth.
Okay. So there are 3 other Democrats in this primary. What makes you stand out?
Yeah, I think it's a real testament to the strength of a young, diverse bench. It's a good thing to see. We should be proud of that. And I think particularly the Democratic Party here in Philadelphia needs to keep growing and keep modernizing and keep reflecting who the Democrats of today really are. And that's a good thing. I think you see that in our race. Everyone's going to say that they're ready on day one. And I think that's an important talking point. But what sets me apart is that I've been ready on day one for the last 10 years because the job of being a state rep is what I do right now in my work at nonprofits and as an advisor for many NGOs across the country. I'm doing constituent service. I am doing bringing the money home for communities who need it. Most importantly, I'm lawmaking in ways that are bipartisan, that are consensus building, that are delivering the goods for people. On that map behind me are 28 pins in 13 states, including 4 right here in Pennsylvania, where I've personally helped write, lobby for, and pass laws that have helped small businesses, minority communities do better. And this is all communities: women, people of color, veterans, immigrants, LGBTQ people. All issues can be addressed through an economic prism that works for everyone. And I've seen that work. I've made the case all over the country that red or blue, everybody sees green. So even if the conservative side doesn't always agree with us on social issues, there's a way to make the case that it can and must be done for the good of everyone in the Commonwealth. And I think no one's more equipped for that than I am. Plus, also, I'm the only union member in this race, and union labor is under attack in this country, certainly in Pennsylvania. They are the bedrock and backbone of growing our Commonwealth since the beginning. And as someone who's been a union member for 15 years, it means the world to me to have so much union support and to be one of the few card-carrying members who will be on the House floor soon.
One of the most important relationships the city of Philadelphia has is its relationship with Harrisburg. How would you make this relationship better for the benefit of the city and especially the schools?
Oh, it's so important. I think one of the things that we don't do nearly enough of is throw Philly's weight around at Harrisburg. It's far too much us against the world up there. And I think we, especially with so much of leadership in the Democratic caucus and really across the House majority or House leadership, being from the Philadelphia delegation, we have more work to do to show people that we are not to be taken for granted, that our schools here put out some of the smartest, most equipped students in America, but we should be giving them the resources they need so that they don't have to scrape and fight their way out of a school system to then find opportunity. We wouldn't put these kinds of restrictions on other school districts, especially whiter school districts around the country. I think there is not nearly enough being done to promote the economic importance of Philadelphia. You know, some of the most important job creators and industry innovators in the entire Commonwealth are right here in this district, right in the heart of Center City, Philly. And we need to leverage that to get more done across the state, saying, you know, you take, we give, and it's important that you give back. And I think one of the most important ways that we can address some of the inequities between sort of the Harrisburg and Philly relationship is helping pass policies that pull back some of the preemption that exists. We know how to take care of our own here in Philly, and we're being stymied by these way out of date laws and policies in Harrisburg that say you can't figure that out on your own without the state's buy-in. Sure, we can. We should be dealing with the unique needs of a gun epidemic, of healthcare inequities, of school inefficient school funding here at home in a way that folks in other counties just can't understand if you don't live here. So give us the tools back, give our leadership the tools they need to be able to bring the money and resources home. We can do it. I know we can. We're Philly. It's what we do.
Many of Philadelphia's leaders believe that the gun violence problem could be solved with better gun regulation. Harrisburg has traditionally disagreed with that. What would you do to facilitate a conversation about this?
As the only Everytown for Gun Safety recognized gun sense candidate in this race, and as a former victim of gun violence myself, this is deeply important to me. And this is a citywide issue. This is not something that you could say, oh, it's happening up there, or it's happening in another neighborhood. It's happening everywhere, to every community and every demographic. We all have skin in the game of addressing gun violence. And some of the simplest measures that can be taken to start reducing some of this gun violence can be done on a bipartisan basis. There is bipartisan support for every family with a gun who has children to have free gun locks, to have mandatory training for how to use them. People are willing to subsidize and give them away. We can do that. Everyone agrees that that is important to keep kids' lives safe. Again, guns don't belong to red and blue families. They belong to families in Pennsylvania. We want to keep all of their kids safe. We also need to be much more stringent on background checks, and also the mental health care apparatus around the gun ownership conversation, that we are not helping nearly enough people who are seeking guns to get access to the care that they need that might help them forget that they ever needed one in the first place. One of the highest communities being affected by gun violence, particularly suicide, are those suffering from depression and mental health disorders. Let's get them help and get a gun out of their hands. That's what they really need.
What will you be able to do in Harrisburg to impact Philadelphia's poverty epidemic?
Jobs, 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 and then some more jobs. One of the things that I think is creating a series of have and have-nots in Philadelphia is that we're stratifying where the work is. We're separating people too far from where the jobs are and where the transit is. Let's get let's get reinvestment back into SEPTA and other forms of public transit, so we can get people going to the jobs that they want to have where they live, so that we're not forcing communities to split apart and people to move because of rent prices and things like that. Let's keep investing in local communities to grow small businesses that are full of new jobs, incentivizing corporate growth in these big downtown corridors that not only incentivize bringing people to work, but then help communities around them flourish. As the longer Comcast sits half empty, it's not their building that suffers, it's the parking garages and the bodegas selling bagels and coffee downstairs and the after-work happy hours and everything else. It's one of the things that I talk about a lot with so many arts institutions here in the district. Too many people are answering surveys saying, oh, we don't feel like coming to the Kimmel Center anymore because it's not safe. But think about the collateral damage of making a choice like that. You spend $50 on a show ticket, yet you drink, you park, you go to a hotel, you hopefully spend some money at a local restaurant and shop, and all of these people get jobs because you came to the city to support our arts and culture. Excuse me. And that is so important to thinking about addressing the poverty issue, that we all have to be investing here locally with our dollars, supporting local businesses, supporting local industries so they keep growing. And part of that is making sure that incentives from the state keep coming back here. We want to keep incentivizing small businesses to grow by giving them more tax credits for more hiring and for, allergy season. Incentivizing growth by also buying locally. And we need to, one of the things I worked on with Governor Wolf since 2016 is expanding state procurement to make sure more Philly and PA businesses can support one another in city and state contracting. Well, that's a key way to make sure state dollars are creating jobs that lift people out of poverty here, is making sure our money is spent on our people, and we can definitely grow those programs.
What else should people know about you or your campaign?
That this is an honest campaign, a positive campaign. I have been in love with public service my whole life. I've only ever worked in nonprofits as an adult. And I believe that service has to be a core part of who you are if you want to represent people in a legislature. One of my core beliefs is it doesn't have to happen to you for you to give a damn. That, we hear a lot about lived experiences making people's campaigns better, and that's true. but so does being a good listener and a good ally with a proven background of delivering for every community. That is more important. Your ability to go and not just be a megaphone, but to also be, a hammer that can get it done for the people who send you there. I have worked my whole career for LGBTQ people, women, people of color, veterans, immigrants across these communities. And though I may not be a member of them, my work experience has put me in the room and at the table in ways I can help. And if I'm at the table, you're at the table. And that's why I think everyone from labor to business to community leaders to religious leaders, so many walks of life in Philly are standing with this campaign because they know we've got the goods to back it up. And the theme of my campaign is let's make a difference. Not only I can, not I'm the only one who can figure this out, but let us get it done together by actually restoring faith in the process of collaboration, expertise, and working towards a common goal. I think we've lost sense of the greater good, particularly in this sort of left on left fighting we see too much on primaries. It is about all of us succeeding or none of us do. And I think my campaign is leading with those values that we are all going to rise together. Philly's counting on Center City to grow and be a beacon of opportunity and hope for everyone. And we need to send someone to Harrisburg to represent it that is a shining beacon of hope and opportunity for all. And I think we can do that.
Where can people learn more about your campaign?
Join us at lovitsforpa.com, LOVITZFORPA. All of our social media is at lovitsforpa. Be in touch. We'd love to hear from you. This is an open communication campaign at all times. We are people powered, and we want to hear from you and make sure we are delivering on what you need as Philadelphians and as Pennsylvanians.
Jonathan Lovitz, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you, my friend. See you on Election Day.
Okay, you are listening to Hall Monitor on WPPM 106.5 in Philadelphia, Comcast Channel 66, and streaming live at phillycam.com. You can find us on Twitter at Hall Monitor WPPM or on our website, www.hallmonitor.org, or on Facebook at PHW WPPM. We'd like to thank Mr. Lovitz for being with us. And next, we have, this is an interview that originally when I reached out to this person, I did not start off as an interview. I just had a question. And then it turned into an interview, which was very interesting.
Well, those are the best kind.
Yeah, it was really interesting. So this is Kenyatta James of the Economy League of Greater Philadelphia. Mm-hmm. And I originally wrote to him to ask him about the PAGE program, which we're going to discuss in depth in the interview. Because this is me pleading my ignorance here. I had never heard of it. I didn't know what it was. And I heard it in the city council hearing. I thought, I need to know what this is. And then I thought, well, let's talk about it on the air and learn. And so everybody can know. So this is our interview with Kenyatta James of the Economy League of Greater Philadelphia. Okay, we are here on WPPM 106.5 in Philadelphia with Kenyatta James, the PAGE director for the Economy League of Greater Philadelphia. Mr. James, thank you for being with us.
And thank you for having me.
So can you tell us a little bit about what the Economy League is?
So the Economy League is a over 100-year-old think and do tank. It was originally founded by kind of the progressive wing of the business community as a way to get a better understanding of how policy affected major issues in Philadelphia. So everything from taxation, which makes sense given that it's the Economy League, but other policies that have to do with workforce, with the way businesses are supported and administered by the government. And really that organization has evolved under the leadership of our current executive director to do more hands-on programming as well. So we're realizing that being able to talk about policy and provide great resources and research, it does have an impact. But our ability to convene partners, because we have so many amazing institutions on our board and we've built so many great relationships over time, puts us in a position to be able to do very good direct programming. So the program that I'm the director of, PAGE, which is Philadelphia Anchors for Growth and Equity, as well as the Well City Challenge, and some of the other work that we do across the region really came out of this insight.
Okay. And so, how would you describe the Economy League's role in helping Philadelphia reduce its poverty rate?
Well, I think that that role is twofold. Um, of course, there's the thing that we traditionally do that we've been doing for a long time, which is providing information. So Mike Shields, our research director, does an amazing job of doing the research to understand, what does poverty look like in Philadelphia? You know what I mean? How exactly do we measure it? Is it growing? Is it decreasing or increasing? Who's in poverty? What neighborhoods have the most poverty or the least poverty, and what changes that have happened at the policy level or in terms of housing prices or employment trends have affected those poverty levels. So really it starts there with understanding the situation, looking at the information, and looking at the potential policies that could affect those situations, and just have being kind of level-headed and clear about what changes might be necessary. One of those insights that we were able to glean over time was that procurement from these large institutions in Philadelphia could be used in a way that would potentially reduce the poverty rate in the city by putting more dollars into local businesses and a little bit more specifically into some of the Black and brown businesses in the city. That would create opportunities, grow these businesses, and create new employment opportunities.
So, and I'm glad you brought that up because one of your chief responsibilities is you're the director of the Philadelphia Anchors for Growth and Equity program page. And I have to plead my ignorance. I cover city council, and it was mentioned in the city council hearing. I thought, I need to know what this is. I wasn't sure, which is why I reached out to you. And I'm so glad we're talking now, because this is tying into a couple things we've been talking about on the show, in addition to conversations we've been having in city council and really around the city about procurement. So tell me about the program a little bit more, and how important it is the allocation of those procurement dollars to Philadelphia.
Mhm. So yeah, the program really brings together the hospitals and the colleges, as well as some of the leading corporate programs from companies like Independence Blue Cross. Um, and I should take a step back. First of all, what we consider an anchor is some of the large institutions in the city that are Philadelphia institutions, right? They're not likely to leave. It would probably be very difficult for them. The Children's Hospital of Philadelphia can't exactly pick up and go to Baltimore, right? So that's what makes these anchor institutions. And these institutions spend billions of dollars every year. So we understand that that is a huge amount of money that circulates through our economy. And while different organizations have had a different level of commitment throughout the years, overall, there hasn't been as much effort paid to how that procurement spend could build the local economy as there should have been over the last couple of years. So we have these institutions that bring in billions of dollars in revenue, spend billions of dollars. They hire and employ a ton of people in the city, but they also have all of this procurement money, some of which could be directed towards local city organizations in a way that would create more jobs and have the sort of positive multiplier effects that we want to see. Um, so my job is really to help these organizations coordinate, to provide them with data, with resources, and with kind of a more in-depth understanding of the market so that they can more easily and effectively work with local institutions. And then also to help them share best practices across their organizations. So many times in the procurement space, you get different issues that can affect businesses negatively. Things like uh, very long payment terms. Institutions are known for paying over 60 or 90 days. And if you're a giant institution like Allied Security, that doesn't matter to you. But if you're a neighborhood institution, it can be very difficult to float, to need to pay employees, potentially purchase products and provide services this entire time. but to not actually receive your payment for 60 or 90 days is quite difficult. So some institutions have been able to cut down on their payment terms. And the way that they do that sometimes is by learning from other institutions, what it took for them. It's a lot easier for a college to look at another college and say, oh, that's how you made this change. We can do something similar. So that's part of what I facilitate as well. And going to your question about the importance of procurement, like I said, these are billions of dollars being spent every year. This is money that has to be spent. These are services that these organizations absolutely need, from janitorial help to construction help when they're building new buildings, to accounting and help with staffing. It's a really diverse set of needs. But this is money that is being spent. It's money that has to be spent. And it's money that, even if a small percentage of it was redirected into the community, would increase the opportunity for Philadelphia businesses by millions and millions of dollars. So that is a gigantic amount of impact that we could see, even if it's a relatively small percentage of what an organization spends. And that's what makes procurement such a unique opportunity.
And when we talk about the multiplier effect, and for those who are unfamiliar with the term, maybe the best way to describe it is like a ripple effect across the economy. You spend more money here, and then it creates more jobs, and then more people have more money, and then it's this sort of happy cycle of upward mobility. What are we really talking about when we discuss that multiplier effect? Are we looking at, is there a way to sort of quantify that? Are there studies about that? What's a good way to describe that to people?
Yeah, so that's an interesting question. There are different ways to quantify it. One of the issues that we have is that we have to take a long view, right? So if someone gets a multi-year contract, we might not really see the impact of that until year 2 or 3. Many times these contracts are progressive if you're shifting from one supplier to another. So the first year might be, $100,000, $200,000. And then by the 5th year, it's a $3 million a year contract. It's during that 5th year that you're really going to see the impact. One of the ways that you can tell is by looking at the growth of these organizations. Are they building new building? Are they leasing more office space? And then if you see like PIDC has industrial development zones. If you see organizations, local organizations that are getting more anchor contracts, building buildings in those industrial development zones, and then you see food trucks showing up, or you see restaurants showing up to now serve the office workers in these buildings. You see them purchasing new equipment from local vendors, or purchasing other services from local vendors. You see them opening up new job opportunities and hiring local people to staff them. Those are some of the different metrics that we look for, both kind of quantitatively and qualitatively. Know what I mean? Part of the way that we're going to make sure that we're seeing investment in the sector is by being able to tell really good stories. And nothing tells a story of growth like a brand new shiny building being built in a neighborhood in, West or North Philly that traditionally has not seen this type of investment and growth.
So do you have some examples of success stories in this realm, or maybe opportunities that are still being missed that would be easy for a connection?
Yeah, I mean, it's been reported on a lot, but one of our best success stories is IMSCO. They're doing a lot of things that I talked about, right? They're building a new building in the Parkside area of West Philadelphia. We were able to support them in structuring corporate partnerships that allowed them to work with our anchor institutions to provide lab supplies. And they've gotten consistent opportunities with Penn, with CHOP, with a couple of our other anchor institutions that have allowed them to grow, to hire, and to build a new building and to add to the facade of the city and to build in a neighborhood that traditionally didn't get this type of investment. We do have a couple of other really, good big examples, but there's also a lot of smaller opportunities where we're seeing the growth, but it's just one staff person. But if you multiply that over, 30 businesses in a sector, then you see what the growth potential really looks like. And that might be in spaces like catering, where we're constantly making recommendations. And each one of those catering companies is only going to add 1 or 2 more additional staff. But it's really creating a great opportunity for a family to build wealth, for a couple of employees to grow. And by taking that money and shifting it into a couple of small vendors, now you're seeing 5, 6, 10, 15 new jobs being created, and being created in a field that, the large players traditionally don't pay that well, but the smaller businesses offer some opportunity for growth, like food service. So that's always exciting for me. I was a small business owner, entrepreneur myself, so I like to see those small upticks in employment. I know how exciting that is from the entrepreneur's perspective. I think overall, one of the issues that we're seeing in this, when we think about business growth, is that it can be difficult for large institutions to do business with smaller businesses. They haven't necessarily designed their procurement departments in a way that is friendly to small business, because in general they don't work as much with small business, right? So how does a hospital switch from ordering books from Amazon to Uncle Bobby's bookstore? That can be a difficult transition if your staff is used to doing one thing or another. And it doesn't mean that the smaller business can't provide great service. It just means that it requires a different type of thinking about how you get the service provided, and who your point people are, and the type of service you expect during the process.
And do you think that's been the biggest barrier towards larger organizations working with smaller local businesses?
I would say it's one of the biggest barriers. Um, I think overall the biggest barrier is that, and anyone who works in procurement will tell you, um, procurement at large institutions is often a little bit disorganized. You have lots of departments that purchase their own products or services. So you have lots of small orders going out that aren't necessarily centralized. And you also have, even when it comes through the centralized procurement, sometimes the procurement staff don't get enough information early on, or they might get something with very short notice. And if you don't have a lot of decision to vet potential vendors, then it's very easy to go with the vendor that you used in the past. But that doesn't open up opportunities for new vendors to enter. So that's been a challenge. Um, Sometimes the type of lists that are out there have been a challenge as well. Many times the lists are a little bit broad. It'll say things like, caterers. So if you need a caterer that does grilling for an outdoor team event, just looking at a list of people that do catering doesn't necessarily give you that background information. And calling every minority caterer in the city to figure out who can do an outdoor grilling type of event, that's tough on a procurement person. So then you might end up defaulting to whoever you went to in the past to do this thing, which once again does not open up opportunities for competition. So I think that that's also been a major struggle.
And do you expect to see maybe local government be able to sort of facilitate more of a attempt for these large organizations to purchase locally?
I absolutely do. And we're already seeing trends in the right direction. We had a page summit earlier this year, and Councilman Mark Squilla, Councilwoman Jamie Gautier, Councilman Isaiah Thomas, as well as the mayor, all attended or sent in videos talking about the importance of procurement, sharing their expectations, as well as showing support for the program and for the individual programs at each one of these anchor institutions. So I think that we are seeing City Council get more and more involved. We also get recommendations about different businesses we should connect with from City Council people. So that's always valuable when something comes from their office, like, hey, this is a great business in my district. We think that they're ready to work with anchor institutions. Can you help them make some introductions? I do think that there is more opportunity for partnership. I don't think that that's necessarily anyone's fault or anything. It's just we're a relatively new program. And this type of coordination isn't something that there's great examples of across the country. Like, we know that coordination is needed, but there's not that many great anchor collaboratives to learn from. So I think it's just a very messy process to figure out what the best practices are, when government should or shouldn't get involved, when things should be left up to the institutions, and when even like semi-government and nonprofit players need to be involved. Organizations like PIDC, the Enterprise Center, the community college that does amazing business training, as well as the Goldman Sachs 10K small business program. There's all these resources across the city, and we're trying to work our best to coordinate with them as well. But there's not necessarily a clear path forward on who needs to be involved when. So, like I said, we're trying to figure that all out.
And when we take a 30,000-foot view of where we are in the city right now, what are some things that could be happening right now to create a more equitable Philadelphia?
Oof. I think getting really hands-on about the way we look at construction could be really, really valuable. You know, construction offers a lot of opportunities. And in Philadelphia, I mean, we're spending billions of dollars to build new buildings relatively regularly. So Philadelphia is going through this amazing construction boom. Our skyline is growing. And we know that there's going to be federal money coming through the bipartisan infrastructure bill coming into the region as well. I think that making sure that there's minority participation at every level in the construction space is something that could have very immediate and very high quality effects on poverty reduction, as well as just equity in general. I think that that's a space. It's just so many people are employed. Wages are relatively solid. Business growth for minority business people in the space can be solid if they're properly supported. So I think that that's an area where we can see a lot of impact over time.
Hey, and where can people find out more about the Economy League?
So they can visit our website, economyleague.org, or they can email me, Kenyatta James at economyleague.org, if they have very specific questions about our program. We're in media a decent amount, you know, more as a think tank. So oftentimes you'll see our research from one of our partners being quoted, or maybe one of our members of leadership being quoted about something that we did a project on, or a piece of information that we shared. So looking at some of that information can be valuable. I think that if you really just want, uh, if you're interested in research and just understanding what's happening there and maybe attending some of our events, LinkedIn and Twitter are great resources. Our research team does a great job of putting out both large and small pieces of information. So you get both, okay, I want to really dive into a topic. Bam, you've got some really great research that you can tackle. But there's also, you know, short Philly facts. Hey, did you know, sort of information that's easily digestible and might be a nice addition to a day, you know, when you're on a commute or in between meetings, to just learn a little bit more about what's happening in the city.
Okay. Kenyatta James of the Economy League of Greater Philadelphia. Thank you so much.
And thank you for having me.
Okay, we'd like to thank Kenyatta James for being with us. You are listening to Hall Monitor on WPPM 106.5 in Philadelphia, Comcast Channel 66, and streaming live at phillycam.com. You can find us on Twitter at Hall Monitor WPPM, on our website, www.hallmonitor.org, or on Facebook at PHWWPPM. So we want to thank Kenyatta James again for being with us. And what I'd like to do right now is talk a little bit about the budget hearings. Okay. Now, I'm going to give the same caveat I gave last week, and we'll give the entire time. Today's budget hearings ended around 4 o'clock, so it didn't give a whole lot of time to dig into things and do some research. We're going to have more in our newsletter that's going to come out on Saturday. We're going to touch on a lot more of this, so you'll have an understanding of what's going on and what some of the key issues are. So what I'm going to do is tell you a little bit about each hearing that happened today, each department that came in, and I think I can do this. If I can share my slide. Oh, there they are. Okay, great. So I think about 8 offices have gone over the yesterday and today. So the first one we'll talk about is the Office of Public Property. So they have a couple different roles here. They do real estate and planning, capital programs, facilities management, and basically they kind of manage all the buildings, structures where city employees work and where like the city equipment is kept. So they do a lot with buying things, anything that deals with city property. So their budget last year was 73.4 million. This year it's going up by about 3.4 million. So just, that's just a quick overview of what they're doing. And again, we're going to have more about this in our newsletter coming out on Saturday. This is what I like to talk about a little more detail. The city commissioners. Now, the city commissioners, I think we all kind of know what they do now after the 2020 election. But basically, they handle all things that deal with city elections. And this budget hearing testimony kind of stuck out a little bit to me. Like I said, we all kind of know how important the city commissioners were. And how much work their office did during the 2020 election and in subsequent elections. They feel that they're not going to have enough funds to adequately undertake the upcoming election. And their belief is that they're going to have to do a transfer ordinance later after the budget's passed. And what that really means is, and these happen with some regularity, budget transfer. It means that the city takes some money from the general fund and reallocates it to a city department. You'll see this happen sometimes when there's like extra overtime they weren't counting on, or a department has to make some kind of purchase that they didn't expect. So what they're planning on, the Office of City Commissioners, is that they're going to have a budget transfer somewhere later in the year to make up for the money they don't have now, even though the budget's going up. They're concerned, though, that if the budget transfer happens in the fall, or even earlier than that, that they're not going to have the funds now, and they're going to have to work a lot more, like over the summer, because they didn't have the money already to spend. So it's going to create more problems for them. This is something that we're going to keep an eye on and see if we can get a comment from the administration about this. Because again, we learned how important elections are and how important it is to fund them. So this is something that's going to be very interesting as we move forward. And I suspect, and I'm just reading the tea leaves a little bit, that this might change a little bit by the time we get to a finalized budget. Just my suspicion.
You have to hope so, because between now and November, with the governor's race and the Senate race and stuff, there are going to be some shenanigans related to voting coming out that the city commissioners are going to need to be able to have money to deal with. And, we tend to underfund a lot in this city, but, it's not like they're asking for billions of dollars.
No, I think they'd like $4 million more. Maybe closer to 5. And when you're talking about a $5.6 billion budget for something that's so important, that's going to be watched so crucially, it makes sense. But, we haven't heard what the administration has to say about that. Hopefully we'll have a comment by the time our newsletter comes out. The other thing that I just want to mention here, they had also, the city commissioners, Commissioner Sabir, talked about fighting disinformation. And that's an important part of what they have to do now.
In fact, that should probably be its own line item in the budget for the city commissioners, because nowhere the 2 places where we are dealing the most with misinformation are in terms of COVID and in terms of voting.
Yeah, absolutely right. And those are things that like I said, I feel like this isn't the end of the discussion on this. So we'll have more about that as time goes on. The Office of Procurement. We've been talking about procurement a lot lately because it's such an important issue. You know, Lance Haver, our own Lance Haver here on the show, he did a very good report last week about procurement. We've been covering some different hearings that have been going on about procurement, and we'll continue following up with procurement. So this department basically purchases supplies for the city. They do contracts. They also help with advertising for certain things. So last year, their budget was just over $6 million. This year, it'll be about 6.7, almost 6.8 million. So we're going to have a little bit more about that, like I said, in the newsletter, how exactly all that breaks down and what they said in their hearing. But this is something that I think people need to keep an eye on. Procurement could be a really, really important economic engine for the city. And I think it's starting to get that kind of attention. So that's just something we're going to keep an eye on here too. The Office of Fleet Management, basically fleet management, they run all the cars and all the repairs for city vehicles. And they have over 6,000 vehicles owned by the city, which I didn't know the number was that high. And they also maintain their own fuel sites and repair facilities. So their budget's going up by about $4 million this year, which kind of makes sense. That's another one that might change a little bit because, first of all, vehicle prices are going up, not just due to inflation, but just because of all things that the microchips are more expensive now than they ever were before. And fuel prices are up.
And also because there were fewer cars being built at the height of the pandemic. They had to shut down production on cars. So there are fewer cars for you to buy.
Yeah, so everything became more dear when it comes to automotive, everything in general, really. So I could see this budget going up a little bit more, or you might see one of those budget transfers later on down the road. And also, I just want to mention, I forgot to mention this during the procurement, but they also brought up the Office of Procurement said, you know, when we're talking about inflation and things costing more, it could cause some problems for us, you know, when we buy things from vendors from outside the city. So that's something else to keep an eye on. Commerce Department, their budget's about the same. It's actually going to be a little bit less. So Commerce Department kind of has a wide portfolio. Basically, they do things like they try to help businesses come to Philadelphia, thrive in Philadelphia. They do workforce development, attract businesses, support small businesses. And one of the things they do, and this is something that's been talked about over a few hearings now, is developing a talent pipeline. And that has to do not just with the workforce, but maybe starting in schools, you know, and not just the technical high schools, but all the high schools, and saying, well, what does the city need? Can the high schools help us prepare those workers to come right into city positions? And I think that's going to be an interesting conversation throughout the budget hearings and maybe into the fall about how do you make more of those connections. So that's something I think would be really interesting to keep following up on. Office of Human Resources. If you've worked anywhere, any large company, you've probably had a human resources department. They work with city departments to hire people, explain benefits to people, those kinds of things. They do education programs and make sure that employees understand city policies. Their budget's going up a little bit this year by about $300,000 or so. And we'll have more about that in our newsletter. The Chief Administrative Officer. Now, this is an office that maybe people don't know a whole lot about. So they do, in a nutshell, they kind of work to modernize things and improve the effectiveness of city services. So they, under the Chief Administrative Officer, is about 8 different offices. innovation and technology, records procurement, contracts, the legislative unit, the Administrative Review Board, the Bureau of Administrative Adjudication, Human Resources. So they all kind of fit together. So this office works to, amongst other things, help with the workforce, keep eye on best practices for city agencies, those kinds of things. Their budget's going up by almost $4 million, just short of $4 million this year, because they're going to be looking at updating the city's record keeping software. And we've been hearing about this for years, how antiquated the city's software really is. It's been described to me as the kind of thing where it's like the green screen computer with the little blinking thing, and then it's kind of stuff like that.
Wow, I thought that they were at least up to Windows 95.
I don't know. It's apparently pretty bad. So this is not just upgrading, but I think trying to get a lot more things into one place. So there aren't so many different things. The system that they want to use is called Opal.
Mhm.
And I don't exactly know what the acronym, I forget what the acronym stands for, but it's going to cost $93 million over the course of, I think, about 10 years. So we're going to learn more about that and explain that to people in upcoming newsletters and on upcoming shows. And the last one we'll talk about is the Office of Innovation and Technology. This is another office that kind of has a wide mandate. They do things like basically plan the technology for the city of Philadelphia. They meet with different departments to assess their technology needs and help them develop infrastructure, things like that. Their budget in 2022 was $78.8 million. Their proposed budget is $87.1 million. Now, this was the last hearing of the day today, so it's the freshest in my mind. And what had happened in this hearing was particularly interesting. And like I said, we're going to have more about this in the newsletter, so I'll just tell you a little bit right now. About 3 or 4 years ago, the city installed cameras on sites that were used for illegal dumping. And they made a big deal about it and said, we're going to put these cameras in. The cameras can be moved. So when we catch people at one site, they're going to move somewhere else. When they get to the next site, we'll move the cameras. Well, that was 3 or 4 years ago. The cameras have never been moved. And the question that Council President Clark today had was, well, why haven't they been moved? And he was not satisfied with the answer. It seemed like the Office of Innovation and Technology wasn't really sure what the answer to this question was when it's really their charge. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that in the newsletter, but I just wanted to let people know that was kind of a little bit of a hot button issue today. A lot of council people asked about that. And, I think you're going to see in budget hearing callbacks, which are coming at the end of the month, more about that. So that's where we are with budget right now. And Denise, I'd like to talk to you now about the trial.
Ah, yes. Or as I like to call it, how I've spent the last 6 weeks of my life, which were only supposed to be 3. But, time moves slower when you're in federal court. As I said at the top of the show, for those of you who don't know, Council Member Kenyatta Johnson and his wife Dawn Shavu and their co-defendants, former Universal CEO and CFO Raheem Islam and Shahid Dewan, were all, I guess, they weren't exonerated, but they don't have to go to jail right now because a mistrial was declared in their trial on bribery and honest service fraud charges. Now, the government was going to try that case first, get a verdict on that, and then move on to the other 20 counts in this particular indictment that are totally against Shahid Dewan and Islam, and range from embezzlement to racketeering and on and on and on. And not only focus on Universal companies here in Philadelphia, but also the charter schools that they were trying to start in Milwaukee. And a couple of people have already been locked up on those charges.
So now that we have this mistrial, which essentially means the jury could not reach a verdict one way or the other. It came out last night that the government was going to at least try to retry this case.
Yes.
What does that look like? I mean, are we talking about just doing the same thing over again, or is it different? Or
well, if the government hopes to win this particular case against Councilman Johnson and Dawn Chavou, they are going to have to put on a much different case or a much different type of case than they did this time around, because this time around, they focused a lot on paper. They focused a lot on emails. They focused a lot on receipts and bills and bank statements and stuff. And they didn't necessarily focus as much on actual human beings coming in and talking to the jury. And all of the other federal trials I've covered Chaka Fattah's trial and Seth Williams's trial, and all the federal trials I've covered, the government has been able to get wins or even to get people to plead guilty based on witnesses and how compelling they were. And particularly in the case of former DA Seth Williams, the first witness in his trial was so compelling, he pled guilty the next day. That was not the case in this case. The main witness the government had was the FBI lead case agent, a gentleman named Richard Hogg, and he was on the stand for 5 days. When you only have 10 days set aside for your entire case, and 5 of them go to an FBI agent, instead of the people that are sending the emails and the different things that he's talking about, you're doing this wrong. I mean, there were other witnesses like the current COO of Universal testified and a developer testified, but for the most part, it was this FBI agent, and then we had the FBI's forensic accountant. Though that was not going to get it done because the evidence was such that it could go either way. And the thing about talking to the people who are connected to the evidence, there are nuances that they can give you that paper can't. But what people need to understand about the Department of Justice is that they have nothing but time and resources. And that is why they are able to win anywhere between 94 and 96% of their cases. And it's also why, no matter how long it takes, they are going to try and convict you if they can. I mean, Vince Fumo, they were after him for 25 years and 2 other court cases before they were finally successful convicting him, because all they've got is time and resources.
And I could be dead wrong about this, but it does seem to me that Fumo aside, if you miss on your first shot, I would think it's a lot harder during a retrial. I could be wrong about that, but I would just think that, that's your best play. But God, I'm sorry.
Well, no, you're probably right on some level. This isn't baseball. It shouldn't be, you get 3 strikes. But, the thing is, if it's a mistrial, they do have the option to retry. And that's what the government is saying it's going to do in this case. Now, just because the government is saying this now doesn't mean it's actually going to happen. When we spoke to Pat Egan, Councilman Johnson's lawyer, he said that he was going to go and talk to the lawyers about not retrying the case. We shall see, if he's persuasive in that manner. But he's a former federal prosecutor, so he might know something that we don't.
Well, Denise, I just want to say before we go that last week you thought this is what was going to happen. So I just want to make sure people know that Denise called this last week. So I want to thank you all for joining us. We'll be back next week here on Hall Monitor.